My name is Rex. If you could raise your hand if you've worked with SceneKit. Just want to get a... Okay, it's not bad. I just wanted to give a quick technical talk about working with ARKit, which is pretty much SceneKit. ARKit just went live with iOS 11 this week, and it requires not only iOS 11, but it requires recent devices. So older iPhones and iPads won't work, but if you have a recent phone, it will support ARKit.
What's recent?
So it supports the iPhone SE 6S, 6S Plus or later, and the iPad Pro and the 2017 iPad. But anything older than that is not supported. Just a little bit about myself. I'm an indie iOS developer in my free time. I've shipped 5 small apps, 2 for the Apple Watch. The one I just released this week is actually an AR basketball game. I'm glad it got approved. It was something I whipped up in my free time. And I started working on it actually after the last meetup at Pivotal. So I haven't had that much time to really work on it, but I did work on that in my free time. I'm on Twitter, and I enjoy little details in UI and UX. And that's just something about me. So yeah, I wanted to talk about ARKit, and ARKit is really SceneKit. So Apple has different frameworks, SceneKit and SpriteKit, but working with ARKit really relies on knowledge of SceneKit, which is a 3D framework that makes it easy to work with 3D objects from Apple. Instead of working at a very low level, SceneKit tries to make it helpful to model your scene. And just like how Tobin had issues with AV Foundation, I think SceneKit is extremely poorly documented. Just simple transformations, animations, things like that. It's really hard to find information. I think there's a lot more documentation on Unity and other tools, but SceneKit is extremely poorly documented. But the foundation of SceneKit, it's pretty straightforward. You have nodes, which are in a tree in your scene. So anytime you're using a iOS app and you're looking at a SceneKit scene, you have a camera positioned, you have lighting, you have materials, physics, and everything is based on SCN node, the scene node. And Apple's docs are actually pretty helpful. So even if you're reading the docs and it doesn't really tell you what to do, at least you can kind of try and figure out what your options are when you look at Apple docs. So what does ARKit provide? ARKit, it actually doesn't provide that much. As a new framework that Apple released, the main feature is that it provides horizontal plane detection. So as you'll see later when I do a demonstration, ARKit will allow you to set a config when you're starting the AR mode for your user to detect horizontal planes. So like this table, the floor, chairs, things like that, ARKit can help you detect, and you can put 3D virtual objects on those. So with ARKit, I could put something on the floor with the camera, and then I could launch objects at it, and it would bounce off, which is pretty cool. It doesn't handle like walls, and it doesn't handle occlusion. Occlusion being like if I were to walk behind the wall, or something is blocking another object. ARKit doesn't handle that. You would have to write your own logic for that. And ARKit, it maps the real world into your SceneKit scene. So it's actually really handy because with ARKit, your camera is your phone or iPad camera is actually the camera that you see, whereas in regular SceneKit, you can actually reposition the camera. But It's actually really intuitive because in ARKit, the z coordinate, or I mean not the z coordinate, but the y coordinate is actually up and down. So if I position something -10 in the y dimension, that would be 10 meters below, and that's really helpful of ARKit. So you don't have to worry about mapping certain things. So I put together a simple demo app. It's on GitHub. The app doesn't cover everything, but it has plane detection, physics, geometry, and other things. I think the best way I can show this is I can use QuickTime to do it. I don't think the frame rate is actually going to be that good, but
unless anybody has a dongle. Anybody has an iPhone? Easy dongle?
Probably not. It's okay. Let's see. New screen recording?
Yeah, it's just video. No,
video?
Yeah.
The first one.
Is this right? For my phone?
No, that records audio, I think.
It's just audio, yeah. Just close down and go back to
What's it?
the file.
New movie?
New movie. And then choose, there you go.
Okay, so yeah, I don't really need the audio, but for the demo itself, I'll show you this very small prototype app, ARKit intro, and then I'll show you, I can show you some of the code really quickly. I won't go through all the code. It's on GitHub. So you can see right here, the table, I basically have a texture that I'm applying. It's the same for the ground. It takes a moment, but you can see basically ARKit has detected the ground, and it really depends on things like your lighting, walking around, to kind of let Apple's device kind of understand your environment. But as part of my demo, I'm able to place objects. So it's very easy. And then this is actually not following Apple's HIG, this shoot button, but I didn't want to spend the time to do something else. But basically I'm basically spawning a SCN sphere based on my orientation of my device. And then I'm basically applying a force to it so that it travels along where my device is pointed. So I can go here, place some objects. And this is just a really simple demo. The stuff that you see on the App Store is a lot more complex, but I think that this is a pretty good way to illustrate just what ARKit provides, is that you can really easily create 3D models to place essentially on surfaces. And yeah, so let me just jump into the code really quickly. Let's see.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's ARKit. I think I have to make this really big.
Yeah, make the fonts.
Let's see. Yeah, I'll try not to go through too much of it, but basically what I wanted to, I think it's still hard to see. All right, I'll just kind of run through it. So with ARKit, and one thing I want to point out really quickly is that in the latest Xcode 9, if you go to new, I think, new project, there's actually an AR augmented reality app that you can just start with. What that does is it actually has a spaceship that Apple gives you that you can just position in front of you and walk around. I deleted that because it's not part of this app, but it's actually really easy to get started. So not to run through everything, but basically with ARKit in your view controller, importing ARKit at the top, you have to set up your scene view, and let's see, I have some gesture recognizers. That's my UI button. So in my app, I don't think you guys can really read this, but what's really interesting is lighting is really tricky. So I actually have a file, I think it's in my XC assets. This image right here, well, I can open it Finder, but my point is that what SceneKit allows you to do is to have a reference image. So it's called IBL. Basically, it's kind of a preset, lighting map of an environment. So depending on an indoor space or an outdoor space with lots of lighting, you basically have preset files that the lighting of your objects when they spawn in your scene are kind of pre-illuminated accordingly. And I think that's something that's actually really hard to get right is lighting, not only of the texture itself of each object, but the shadows, because I haven't found a good way to kind of match up the lighting in your actual location with the lighting in your app. Because if you think about it, wherever the user is using your AR app, the lighting could be from a lot of places. It could be from one location. There are a lot of demos on the internet that show lighting, that match the environment exactly, but those are kind of, those are canned demos. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you add multiple image maps or just one?
I think it's one. I think I could probably switch it, but so I think what you could do is you could have a list of assets that you can basically change depending on if you're able to detect which one matches best.
Right.
But even then, I don't think it's really an ideal process. So I mean, there's basically that's actually a really cool thing is that you give it a image that SceneKit mimics the lighting in that image to the objects in your scene.
Out of curiosity, what does that image look like?
Yeah, let me just. It's basically a panoramic. Let me see. It's just like a room that it tries to get all the lighting in a room. Let's see. Going back. I think a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
So when do you actually call the set up the lighting? Is that like
at the beginning? So as part of the setup right here, I basically I'm just using the UI image that in this case is named spherical, and I'm setting the lighting environment contents to that image.
Can you set it after the fact?
Yeah, I mean you can set it later. I mean, but I think in my case, I want to either for the scene environment lighting, or if you're trying to get more complicated and actually introduce SCN lights. So there's 4 different types of lights that you can use in SceneKit, like Omni or spotlights. Things like that you probably do afterwards to dynamically match what you're trying to do. But basically in here, I set up in advance as just kind of like a starting default. Running through this just creates objects in the 3D space based on the camera position. I was able to get this code looking through different tutorials and things like that. It's all documented on the GitHub page. So I definitely encourage you guys to take a look at that. Here I have a scene view delegate that I'm conforming to for my view controller. And basically, it allows you to handle lifecycle events for the plane detection. So basically, when SceneKit finds a new surface or updates the surface of this table as I'm walking around, that is really up to you how you want to handle that. In my case, I'm basically creating a SCN plane wherever it's detected, and creating that plane at that location with a material texture on top. And I think that's actually most of it. So I can go back to the slides. Let's see. Yeah, it's on GitHub. I can show you guys the link again later, even though it's right here. So there are a lot of challenges working with ARKit/SceneKit. I think one of the biggest challenges I ran into was working with 3D asset files. So I'm not a experienced developer with 3D assets, but basically you're able to use a popular conversion format called Collada or DAE, and you can convert them to a scene file in Xcode, and within that scene file you can make adjustments. But for the most part, for me that was a huge challenge, was getting the correct cleared assets that I could use in my app. And basically, if you have a dedicated team or person that you can rely on to help give you 3D assets, or even to convert them properly, I think that would be a huge time saver. I did all that myself, where I would encounter different 3D files and import them into Xcode and then have a ton of issues because they weren't really meant for the Collada format. A lot of times they were in 3ds Max or Blender, and converting it into a format that was more native to SceneKit was extremely painful. And even the scale of objects when you import them is just completely hard to use. And I even found things where the Y and Z axis were switched. Again, working with SceneKit, a lot of the math, I would say honestly, can be very intimidating, because not only are you dealing with different orientations and vectors like SE and vector 3, a lot of times you have to do transformations using quaternions, which are basically, it's like a 4x4 matrix representation of your object. So like position and different magnitude. So a lot of that I think really goes down to fundamental 3D game programming knowledge. And this kind of SceneKit just kind of assumes you have that 3D programmer background, but it's extremely hard to find documentation on Stack Overflow for the most basic things. I already mentioned, but lighting is actually really challenging to get right, because if you just put lights in your scene, it actually will not look natural at all. If you insert spotlights, like I put a spotlight in my app to give my objects like a shadow on the ground, but by doing that, the sides were all dark because the intensity was not correct. So I think just introducing multiple lights into your scene correctly and even tuning the intensity is just I think is a challenge. Another challenge I ran into is that you can't use a simulator for development. So I think your best friend is going to be, at least today, the Plus model, like the 7 Plus or soon the 8 Plus. I'm not sure how the 10 is going to fit into that equation, but I found that to kind of cover from the iPhone SE to the 7 to the 7 Plus, the 7 Plus is the best for shooting app preview video footage, because as the 5.5-inch device, it gives you the most coverage. You don't want to be using the smaller phones, because when you go to iTunes Connect, it's going to ask you for something from like the 7 Plus. Yeah, so that's my talk. My app is on the App Store. It came out this week when iOS 11 launched. It's actually a really simple basketball game, and I'm on Twitter. Let me see. I can show you guys. Let me see. I have to open this. Yeah, here's just like a simple GIF of come on. Yeah, so this is my app. Like basically, it's nothing too complex, but it lets you go around outside or even inside, as long as you have enough space, and just shoot hoops. It's just a fun little thing. Does anyone have any questions?
So when you showed the texture mapping onto flat surfaces, how does it do walls?
Yeah, it doesn't. The default for the AR view session config is either like horizontal plane
Yes,
or none.
Oh, okay.
So that's like the two modes that it gives. So I think hopefully in the future they'll have that,
Yeah.
but for now it doesn't detect walls.
I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you share like what you see like your A or C with another phone? Like you guys like playing at the same time?
There's no built-in way. I think there are apps that are able to do that, but that's all proprietary. So either people are using different third-party libraries or doing that themselves, but there's no built-in. So Apple has kind of made it very hard to persist the session over time. So as you are using AR, once you exit, like home screen or anything, generally the AR session ends, and that generally doesn't get persisted even on the same device, because when you open your phone again, who knows where you might be. So so there are apps that let you collaborate with people either in real time, but again, that's not built in from ARKit.
Can you, are you kind of following up on that a little bit? Can you get access to the marker data from ARKit?
I think people have been looking into that, but to my knowledge, it's not, it's not something that's really straightforward and intended yet. So even though people can kind
What was
of,
the question, sorry?
Oh, sorry.
I think he was asking about what kind of markers or data you can get from ARKit for the session, but I don't think there's anything that's like kind of recommended or intended as support from Apple. So anything you do is kind of reverse engineering.
You're not talking about anchors?
Well, I guess, yeah, because I'm like wherever you have the device point at the floor and it's identified like where the plane is, if you could get that data that I use, then share that with another device or.
But if you were using the camera, couldn't you get location?
Yeah, so I know there's an ARCL project that integrates ARKit and core location, but even then, I think to get that level of precision, it's not something that just is kind of out of the box. I think with core location, you have a degree of accuracy with the GPS device, and core location, I think as you walk around, it's very accurate on the distance that you move your device, but it's still not like precise enough to where we're standing and what you see exactly you can recreate exactly. I don't think we're at that level of precision, but certainly I think apps have been trying to replicate the experience where it'll save information for a given location, and if you go nearby enough, it'll show that to you, but it's not the same as like right here for me is right here for someone else. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I think there's a lot of potential in the mapping that's been done on, for example, Pershing Square or geolocations that
Yeah.
are universally cataloged. You could then lever that.
Yeah, there's another interesting part about iOS 11 that I didn't talk about, but there's a lot of things that Apple introduced on the machine learning side that I haven't touched, but definitely people are using machine learning to do advanced recognition of objects, of places, and things like that. So I really can't speak to how to do that, but once you combine ARKit and machine learning that Apple provides and other data sets, I'm sure you could do a lot. It just, kind of the sky's the limit.
I think that's the most fascinating part of it, is the idea of combining, for example, Pershing Square with weather data to influence your lighting of your object. Like today, it's overcast.
Yeah.
That's an ideal. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think definitely for apps that have support for today or for what Apple provides in the future, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for things like that to just get better over time. So it is really exciting. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking, what if you had like a card or something you put down and you had two phones with AR and they both look at the card, then they could calculate their distance from each other and the angle on the card and
Yeah.
you could play a multiplayer game.
I'm trying to think if there are, if I can think of an existing app that does that, but you're right in that, you know, if you have a reference point,
Yeah.
that's certainly one way. I know that I think last CocoaHeads there was a guy who was talking about using the beacons, but
Or Bluetooth, can you use Bluetooth?
yeah, Bluetooth beacons. I mean, there's certainly a lot of ways. You know, if you do have like a QR code, or if you have something unique that multiple people can orient and calibrate their device, definitely you can say, hey, these multiple people are at the same place.
Mm-hmm.
All right, anyone else? Yeah, I would say definitely, you know, feel free to ask me questions on Twitter, or, you know, look at the repo on GitHub. It's pretty simple. I kind of stripped out a lot of the stuff, but it runs and it's a cool starting point. Thanks, everyone.